Hey, welcome back to Shadow Shorts. If we've never met before, my name is Jeff Echols. I am a senior advisor and the head of marketing for Shadow Partners. This is a bit of a mobile edition today because it's a little bit timely. We're doing a walkthrough of a facility right now as part of the planning for our upcoming Shadow Summit. So I'm on the campus of Georgia Tech right now in um, the Academy of Medicine building escaped me there for a minute. Academy of Medicine building where Shadow Summit will take place, and so I appreciate your patience and a little bit of tolerance for maybe not the best acoustic lighting, but we run with Shadow Shorts. We do this every weekday at noon Eastern, and today I am joined by Lee Lance. He is a co-founder and the CEO of Ecobot, and they're doing some really interesting things over at Ecobot. And one of the things that has intrigued me about their approach is this idea of digital efficiency, maybe if I can call it that, and why. Why do we need these tools? Why do we use these tools? And more broadly, why does any of this matter? So, Lee, we were talking before we went live here about regulations and how we do the work, why it's important, how we monetize some of these things that we do. So, I don't know what's the best way to kick this off. Why does it matter that we're matching up that we're matching tools not only for doing, but then as we look at what comes next? Why does any of this matter?
Yeah, I think it matters, Jeff. Thanks for having me on here today to share some of this vision. I think it matters because the construction industry is looking for every opportunity to find efficiencies and looking at workforce shortages and labor cost increases and material cost increases and we are certainly one. We provide solutions around one aspect of the total life cycle of an asset, looking at the environmental permitting work that happens between land acquisition and moving dirt, and looking at the environmental requirements around reporting that have to be accomplished there. And so we coming in and creating efficiency around those processes are really important. But I think that the value and the importance extends even further beyond efficiency in that specific task, because there are trends everywhere in a need for us to build in a more sustainable, resilient manner. And all of the information that we need in order to equip engineers and planners with the data that is needed in order to build in a more resilient manner is locked up in that permitting process. So there's we see an opportunity to digitize, certainly, and create that efficiency in the actual practice of obtaining a permit. But I think more importantly, looking at what can we do with that data and who can we get that data to, how to get that
Yeah.
data into the hands of planners and engineers, into the hands of a GIS team, in order to have a better sense of what's out there and where the work is occurring and the impact that it's having.
Yeah, that's a great point. I mean, there's so much, not only of the design, but also the delivery, the construction, if
Yeah.
you will,
Hmm.
is so data heavy. And, over the course of my career, I think the amount of data that we were dealing with is, I don't know, 100x. When I graduated
Yeah.
from school a long, long time ago, right, to
Yeah, sure.
today, changed exponentially. And that idea of not only, like you said, I mean, it's not only the handling of the data, the parsing of the data, but also the transmitting and who's it going to. But you
Hmm.
also made a point about how do you monetize. Um, I think it's one thing. It's like, okay, I've got to collect all this data. I've got to put all this data in forms and get it to the regulators, so to speak, get it through
Hmm.
permitting. But then, what's the value of all of this work beyond the hey, I've got to pull a permit to really dumb it down? But what's the
Yeah.
value of this as we go forward?
Yeah, and I think just to kind of just go one step further there, Jeff, what you're talking about, I think historically the this extraordinarily high volume of data that has to be collected to go to a regulator to get a permit, all that data dies at the permit.
That's a great
You
point. Yep.
you walk out with the permit, and you're aware that there's some environmentally sensitive issues that you have to either plan around or mitigate and offset. But the value is that we have an opportunity to take that data beyond the permitting process, beyond environmental policy, and get that into the hands of the people that are making decisions to understand really what their options are on site, and making sure that they're able to plan in the most resilient way possible. So um, being able to present visualized information of
Mm.
polygons on a map of a sensitive area, so that it's not just an isolated permit process, but an active opportunity to collaborate with all of the stakeholders on a project, to really understand what is the best immediate and long term plan for what's being built on behalf of the client.
Yeah, yeah, that makes a lot of sense. So able to get into sort of a real world scenario. So, we've been dancing around obviously what specifically Ecobot does. So if we were to look, if we were to create a concrete example of what we're talking about now using Ecobot,
Mhm.
or the process that you go through and how you've developed this, what does that look like in the real world for an engineer or developer? There's different
Yeah.
stakeholders involved here. What's a real world example of this?
Sure. I'll speak to an example, and anybody listening in, you can follow up and find this Esri user story. If you look up Ecobot Esri user story, you'll find it. And there's one of our mutual customers, ESE partners out of Texas. They were working on an agricultural conversion. It was 3,000 acre agricultural parcel that was being converted to a 3,000 acre solar power plant. And you can imagine, I believe it was rice, so pretty wet. And they were looking at at what do we need to do to assess if there's any federal jurisdiction on wetlands,
Mm,
isolated or connected in this parcel, so that we can move forward with the plan and the construction of this 3,000 acre solar power farm. And so mechanically, what has to happen, federal policy, state policy requires that people go out in the field. These are usually soil scientists, botanists, ecologists that have to assess natural resources conditions in order to collect that data to send it to a regulator to get a in order to get a permit to move forward with construction. So in this particular example, across, you can imagine this 3,000 acre parcel, and across this land, this company, ESE Partners, had to stand in, I think it was 250 spots across 3,000 acres. And on each one of these spots, collect detailed information about any vegetation or visible hydrology. They have to go down a couple of feet into the soil and get color and texture information about the soil. Again, on 250 dots, fill out a government form with all of this information, run some calculations in order to determine where there are wetland cells. So each one of these dots, they come in pairs typically. So you'll observe in one spot, this is an area that is a wetland, for example, and then I'm going to walk the boundary and create a map. And then by contrast, I'm going to go to an area that's adjacent that is not in a wetland, and report on that as well. So you've got that compare contrast. So an extraordinarily high volume of work that has to be done in order to map this out and ensure that you're compliant, but also that you've got a good understanding of what's going on this piece of property as you're doing your planning. And so um, our platform has a couple of components. It's Ecobot Collector and Ecobot Manager. So Collector is the mobile app. They go out in the field, and it is a workforce enablement tool. So these botanists and soil scientists are out there making observations, entering the information into Ecobot Collector, where we've built in a bunch of reference guides to make sure that they understand what they're looking at, they're being compliant with the region that they're in. run calculations, automate QA, and then connect that to the office in real time if there happens to be a data connection. A lot of times this is greenfield development. There's not a data connection, so they sync later on. And then it enables the project management team in the office to overlay it with any public data, any other information that they need in order to prepare those reports to go to a regulator. But what we do in the process, again, checking that box, we do what we need to do for compliance for getting that permit, but we assemble this, even just on this one individual project, a pretty massive data lake of rich information on this site that then can we can write to a feature service layer and put into the Esri tech stack, and better enable that transmission of information across silos in the organization, eventually making its way to planners and engineers to best understand what they're finding on site.
Yeah, that makes a lot of sense. You mentioned silos, and that's one of the things that we're fighting all the time. And I
Yeah.
wonder if it's, in a way, it almost seems like at times we're going backwards. We get more siloed, more boutique solutions we have,
Yeah.
But to me, what you're saying, um, because it's just one piece, right? That it's, I shouldn't say just one piece, but it's sort of the beginning of the
Hmm.
process, and it's going to need to travel through lots and lots of different stages as this project goes forward. So, if people want to know more about Ecobot, of course, they could go to ecobot.com. That URL is now in the bottom left-hand corner of your screen. Is there anywhere else that you would send them to learn more about the product and the process?
Sure. We have a series of our own called Ecobite, which I think is not just about Ecobot, but about the industry that we're in specifically the environmental components in and around the AEC industry. Ecobite, BITE, and you can find it on our website. But there's a YouTube channel, and then it's also put out as a podcast. So it's a great way to get a little 10-minute snippet from industry experts about trends and some about where Ecobot fits in, but I think more importantly about why all of this matters. And you can get a little 5-10 minute clip, and then if you want to go deeper, there's a much longer form back and forth interview with our team and whoever we're talking to. I think that's a great way, especially if people listening to this stream are familiar vaguely with the permitting is part of the process, but want a deeper dive into all of the other pieces that are moving around. I think that's a great way to learn some more for sure.
Yeah, yeah, I love it, and and that also reminds me. I mentioned Shadow Summit at the beginning of um, of our talk here because that's right now I'm at the Academy of Medicine building on the Georgia Tech campus, which will be the site of Shadow Summit 2023 in October here in Atlanta. Um, and as we've talked, you know, what will Shadow Summit 20 be? How is this conference of ours different than other conferences? And really the the differentiator, I guess, is deep dives. The conversations that'll happen. There's a theater right on the other side of this wall where the panel discussions will be, and the keynote speakers will be, and these will not be superfluous presentations.
Yeah,
There are going to be conversations that like EcoBite that dive deep in on a topic. And so
yeah,
if you've enjoyed this conversation between Lee and I, or if you enjoy the Bites. Maybe Shadow Summit is something that you'd want to attend. Of course, there'll be talk
yeah,
of digital tools and other innovations for the built environment. KP Reddy, who's wandering around here somewhere right now, he's our CEO. The way he's described Shadow Summit for 2023 is it's going to be a Cliff Notes version of everything that's happened in terms of innovation for the built environment in 2023, and then a preview of what you need to plan for and budget for 2024 for innovation. And so, if that sounds intriguing to you, go to shadowsummit.com. We're updating. Actually, I just heard today that by the beginning of next week, there'll be a full update to that website with schedule and speaker information and all those things. So shadowsummit.com is where you can find out more about that. Um, so join us, plan to join us October 24th through 26th here in Atlanta. But in the meantime, check out Ecobite, as Lee said. The content there is great. It's again deep dive into specific area of innovation,
Mhm.
environmental sustainability, and then go to ecobot.com to learn more about the product Ecobot. So Lee, I really appreciate you joining me for this
Yeah,
conversation today. This has
for
been
sure.
fun. Absolutely.
Yeah,
And
for sure.
love what you're doing.
And I think, one of the things that I love about, opportunities to go to somewhere like Shadow Summit is to talk about, like, not just the medium term, but the long term. Like, why does
Yeah.
this all really matter, right? So if whether
Yeah.
it's Ecobot and what we're doing around biodiversity data, which is essentially what's being captured for this permitting,
Yeah.
or any of the other portfolio companies
Mhm.
of Shadow, is looking at, like, what's the long term vision. There's so much we can do with this data. For an Ecobot specific case, we've got an opportunity to predict our future with this biodiversity data that we're collecting. We're scratching the itch of achieving this permit right now, but there's this long vision of, I mean, really, technology and data ought to be able to outperform even something like environmental regulation. So
Yeah.
there's
Yeah.
a there's a there's a it's great to come together and be able to talk about, what all we can do now, what needs to happen. We've got to address labor shortages and inefficiencies, and we do that. But I think that there's a bright future, I think, for all
Yeah.
of us as we find a way to leverage technology to capture that data, to really see where we're headed and what our impact is, and what we can do about it. So,
Yeah.
thanks for giving me a opportunity to chat with you today.
Yeah. Absolutely.
I really
And that's
appreciate
a
it.
great that's a great point. And we're going to showcase, right? Startups will be there, portfolio
Mhm.
companies will be there. Those things will be showcased. But the way that you just said that, it's why did
Yeah,
that's the real reason. And we're going to be talking for 2 days, 2 full days about why it matters, why all this
yeah,
innovation for the built environment matters. So thank you for bringing that up. That's a great point.
yeah, for
So
sure, for sure.
shadowsummit.com,
Yep.
ecobot.com, and you can learn more. And I'll be back tomorrow at noon Eastern. Hopefully back in the office tomorrow and not a mobile edition, with another Shadow Short. So Lee, thank you. Thank you to you out there
Yeah, for
that
sure.
are watching live or in a time shifted format. And we'll see you for the next one. Thanks, everybody.
Thanks. See ya. Bye.